I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Linda was my past, but Kalila and our baby were my future. We spent the flight home talking about our plans, from decorating the nursery to future vacations. By the time we landed, I was more certain than ever that leaving Linda and starting anew with Kalila was the best decision I'd ever made. At home, we finalized the purchase of our new house. It was perfect, spacious, with a big yard and room to grow. As we stood in what would be the baby's room, Kalila looked at me, her eyes shining. "This is where we start our real life, Scott." I nodded, pulling her close. "Together, always." And so with Kalila by my side and our baby on the way, we embraced the future, leaving the past where it belonged, behind us. "Exactly when you needed her," Annabelle remarked. "Jesus, Daddy, if you had gotten together any earlier, you'd have ended up as your cellmate's bitch, not fate's. You had the last laugh." "Yeah, but that was after I left Linda," I replied. "What about the 20 or so odd years that I wasted with her?" "Daddy, you got even luckier there," Annabelle said. "You have something pretty amazing to show for those years." "Yep," I replied sarcastically. "I got to regularly torture a lesbian." "I was thinking more along the lines of you getting me," Annabelle smiled. I couldn't help it. I grinned and embraced her. "You are so right about that," I said, smiling. Then my face clouded. "That brings me back to where we started. That brings me back to you, Linda. You lied to me during our entire existence together. You knew, and you married me anyway. And when you couldn't take it any longer, instead of being honest with me and giving me some dignity, you lied to me and cheated on me." "It wasn't precisely cheating," she explained. "How the hell do I make you see this? Hello, Scott. Cheating would involve me having sex with another man. I've never done it. I never would. Diana never posed a danger to our marriage, and I'm trying to be very kind about it. She just posed a threat to your ego. I think you're a little spoiled, but much of that was my fault. I mean, I have always treated you as if you were the most important person in the universe. I suppose with time you began to believe it. But honey, everything does not revolve around you, even your crazy theory about how fate screwed you over. Scott, fate is your bitch. Look at this. You arrived home when you shouldn't have. You heard some things you shouldn't have. How did that end? Did your life end? Nope. What happened? Did you sit around feeling miserable? Nope. Fate granted you a do-over. Fate gave you exactly what you had lost. We met during our 20s. Kalila is in her 20s. When I was 22 years old, you knocked me up. Kalila's age is exactly the same. Whatever you think, Scott, you landed on your feet. I am the one that got crap on. I can't find work anywhere in town. I have a house that I cannot live in or sell. I had to borrow money from my parents to get here because my automobile wouldn't make it. I have a lot of bills that I can't pay. Everyone in the town where we grew up hates me. I have health issues, and even our daughter is lying to me. She might have given me the money you offered her and stayed at my house to help out. But nah, Scott, your life is charming. I am the one that got crap on." Nobody spoke for quite some time. "My name is Linda. You did not get shit on," I exclaimed. "You were the one who did the shitting. You got splattered because you couldn't move your feet. Linda, you did it in our home." "I'm sorry," she wailed. "That was a mistake. It just happened. Scott, you should know better than anyone else on the earth how horny I become." "How the hell do I know that?" I spoke quietly. "You've been lying to me and pretending you liked it when you didn't." We found ourselves back in our hometown. Linda was waiting for us, looking a bit worn out but determined. Kalila squeezed my hand as we approached the lawyer's office. It was time to end this chapter and start a new one. Linda greeted us with a forced smile. "Let's get this over with," she said, avoiding eye contact. We sat down with the lawyer, who went over the contract one last time. "So to reiterate," the lawyer said, "once the house is sold and the money is transferred, Linda, you are legally bound to have no further contact with Scott. If you do, you'll owe him the full appraised value of the house." Linda nodded, her expression unreadable. "I understand," she said quietly. After signing the documents, we headed to the house for one last look. Kalila and I walked through the empty rooms, memories flooding back. It felt surreal to be there again, knowing it was for the last time. "I remember playing in the backyard," Annabelle said, her voice tinged with nostalgia. "Those were some good times." "Yeah," I agreed, feeling a pang of sadness. "But it's time to move on. As we left, Linda stayed behind to finalize a few things with the real estate agent. "I'll miss this place," she admitted, "but I need the money more." "Goodbye, Linda," I said, trying to muster some compassion. "I hope you find what you're looking for." She nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. "Goodbye, Scott." We drove back to our new life, feeling lighter, but also aware of the weight of the past. Annabelle sat in the back seat, texting her friends about the trip, while Kalila rested her head on my shoulder. "We did the right thing," she whispered. "Now we can truly start over." "Yes, we can," I replied, feeling a sense of closure. It's a new beginning for all of us. As we crossed the state line, I felt a surge of hope. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in years, I felt ready to face it head-on, with Kalila by my side and Annabelle ready to forge her own path. It wasn't a perfect ending, but it was ours, and for now, that was enough. We were driving my SUV into Michigan. I was nervous as hell, but Kalila was so excited that she couldn't sit still. "I can't wait to tell my mom," she exclaimed. "Baby, you told her the entire story. I did it twice, on Christmas Day no less," I said with a smile. "Yeah, but she hasn't heard it in person," she went on to say, "and I've remembered more details since then." "So what else are you excited to see?" I asked, trying to match her enthusiasm. "Everything," she responded swiftly. "I mean, we are talking about where I grew up. You did too. Honey, this is the spot I was born. You were too. Just 2,000 years before. You understand? Home? We haven't been there in a very long time. There's so much to see again, so much to remember." "Baby, have you ever heard that expression, 'you can't go home'?" I asked her. "It's an odd thing. It's more of a shift in viewpoint. When you were a child, everything appeared so big. Well, they seem to be smaller as an adult. Everything appears to be unique and fantastic. They are usually unremarkable, if not outright cheesy. It's like trying to fit your grown-up ass into a chair that seemed enormous when you were younger. I simply don't want you to be disappointed." "I won't be," she replied confidently. "Ever since I was a child, I thought our town was extraordinary. I mean, it is perfect. It's right in the center. It's too huge for a little town and too small for a large city. So we reap the benefits of both. We have all of the conveniences and technology of larger cities, as well as the charm and personality of smaller villages. We also have none of the negative aspects of either. We don't have the crime that cities do, yet we're not so isolated and backwards that we don't have access to the best shopping and attractions Michigan has to offer. In less than an hour, we can reach Detroit or Lansing. In the summer, we have access to all of Michigan's gorgeous lakes, while in the winter, we can ski. It is my version of paradise. Even in my teens, I always wanted to live there and raise my family." As she finished speaking, I looked across at her. I wasn't expecting the sneer on her face. For the first time in memory, my lovely angel had a sort of supercilious grin. Her entire face flashed a self-satisfied sneer. "What's going on in that gorgeous head?" I asked, intrigued. "Scott, when I was a teenager, all of my buddies, everyone thought I was fucking crazy," she chuckled. I immediately peeked across at her before returning my attention to the road. Her tone of voice made it clear that this was important to her. "Why was that so crazy?" I asked. "Most little girls want to grow up and have families." "Yeah, dummy," she said, laughing. "But I always told them I'd have them with you. They always felt it was absurd, a crush. I suppose they never expected me to be crushed by you pumping me full of your crap." A tinge of guilt passed through me. "I know that look, Scott," she growled. "We're perfectly on schedule. In reality, we're a little behind. I always said we would, and by we, I always meant you and I. Ask Annabelle when we see her, and ask my mother tomorrow. We were going to have 4 children by the time I was 30. I wanted them approximately 2 years apart, so we are running a bit behind." I felt a wave of emotions hit me. This was her dream, our dream, and now it was becoming real. We had faced so much to get here, but we had made it. As we approached our old town, memories flooded back. I saw the familiar sights, the places where we had grown up, and I realized how much we had both changed. Kalila reached out and took my hand, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "This is it, Scott. Our new beginning," she whispered. "Yeah, it is," I replied, squeezing her hand. "Let's make it unforgettable." And with that, we drove into our future, ready to face whatever came our way, together. So we need to get started on the second one shortly. Get your head back in the game, mister. Jesus, Kalila, I exclaimed. The first one hasn't left you yet. Give me a break. You don't get any breaks, she replied sincerely. You constantly say you'll love me forever and give me whatever I desire. Do you really mean that? Or are you just trying to slip between my legs? I stammered. Baby, I love you, I said with my whole heart. You put me back together after everything, but I never remember saying those words. When did I say this? Okay, you haven't exactly said it with those exact words, she responded with a chuckle. But I translated your meaning from what you said. I'm a professional editor, you know. Extracting meaning from a writer's words and occasionally utilizing new words to communicate it more effectively is part of my job. Something in my expression told her I didn't understand what she was saying. It ruffled her feathers, so she turned sideways to look at me. So you don't remember me saying, "Fuck me, baby, fill that pussy up"? She almost moaned as she spoke. And you said? As clear as day. Oh yeah, take it, you hot little bitch. And I said, if you keep this up, one of us is going to get pregnant. And you said, do you want to stop? Or perhaps get some condoms? And I said, there is no stopping now, baby. Paint my walls. And you began grunting, and I put my legs around your waist in case you attempted to pull away. Do you not recall that, Scott? Kind of, I said. Well, that translates to, you'll love me forever and give me whatever I want, she added, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Oh, I wondered if she was crazy after all. Scott, I'm a simple girl with simple needs, she went on to say. All I need in life is you and a lot of small replicas of ourselves running around our house to be truly happy. Could I please have that? There's nothing I want more, Kalila, I said at that point. But baby, all of your friends are still. Scott, I swear to God that if you start that age difference bullshit again, I will stop the car and slap the snot out of you. She shrieked so loudly that I nearly drove off the road. Look at me, Scott, she snarled. I can't. I'm driving, I said. Pull over, she hissed. We're on the freeway, I complained. But I pulled over to the shoulder and stopped the car. She had her arms crossed over her chest. Does Scott love me? Yes or no? She asked angrily. Yes, I said. Are you sorry that you started fucking me? She asked. Well, it doesn't matter who started, she retorted. And that was not the question? Of course not, I replied. I love being with you, Kalila. But there are no fucking buts, she exclaimed. If we keep having sex, we will have babies. What the hell are you trying so hard not to laugh at, Scott? Even as she yelled at me, she raised her hand in the air. She had developed the habit of waking up on Christmas morning to find me slipping her engagement ring onto her finger. She appeared to be determined to ensure that everyone in the universe saw her ring, even me. Kalila, I love you, I said seriously. I love you more than anything on earth, including my car. I promise to give you everything you want, including a big family. I want that too. Her eyes softened, and she leaned in to kiss me. That's all I needed to hear, she whispered. Now, let's get back on the road. We've got a lot of memories to make, and a lot of babies to start planning for. With a laugh, I started the car again, feeling more certain than ever that our future, though complicated, would be full of love, laughter, and endless possibilities. I love everything we do. I can't think of anything better than spending the rest of my life with you and having children with you. But a large part of loving you is wanting the best for you, which I sometimes wonder if you wouldn't be happier with someone else. Pain shot through me so suddenly that I barely registered her hitting me. It scrambled my brain for a second before I saw her tears and hugged her to me. You were doing great, she sniffled, and then you had to throw in that butt bullshit. I've already told you, there are no fucking buts. I tried even harder to hide my laughter. Okay, Scott, what is so funny? She inquired. You keep saying there's no fucking buts, I said with a giggle. But we do this all the time. You're constantly begging me to fuck your butt. I believe you enjoy it as much as... Do you see what I mean? She hissed. I obviously don't need somebody younger. You're young enough for both of us. Drive the car, Scott. As we drove, she reached out to take my hand, as if to assure me that everything was okay between us. Honey, could you please grasp my fingertips? She stated. If somebody looks in the car, I want them to see my ring. As much as I hated to admit it, driving back into our old hometown felt special. To be honest, I'd convinced myself throughout the years that one town was just as good as another, but but driving down those streets made me seriously ponder the possibility that I was mistaken. Khalila's head was swiveling, pointing out things, stores, and people, then asking if I noticed them. "We'd better go to my mom's place first, baby," she exclaimed enthusiastically. "Khalila, why?" I asked. "I can't," she said, "because the pregnant girl has to pee like a racehorse." I felt awkward about going to her mother's place. I chatted with her on the phone, and she seemed fine with us being together, but things aren't always the same in person. My anxiety increased as we approached the driveway. Khalila leaped out of the car as if it were on fire and ran for the door. Even as she was doing so, her next-door neighbor emerged onto her porch. She saw me and waved as I got out of the car. "She got you, huh, Scott?" She laughed. "I can't believe this. She's been saying it ever since she was this big." She extended her hand. "She's a great step above the creature you were married to, Scott. Congratulations." Even as I turned to enter the home, I noticed Khalila's mother, Catherine, on the porch, waiting. Her expression was not joyful. "Hey, Scott," she said. "I'm sorry, Catherine," I murmured. "I really do. I mean, I never intended." "Sure you didn't," she replied. "Scott, honey, trust me. I am the happiest person for both of you. I'm glad Khalila has you. It's just, I know, the age difference thing," I said. "Scott, honey, trust me. I am the happiest, perfect individual for both of you. I'm glad Khalila has you. It's just, I know the age difference thing," I said. Catherine started laughing at me. "Oh boy, I've heard about that guilt of yours," she remarked. "You really need to get over that, Scott." "So what are you upset about?" I asked. "It's not you," she said. "Shit, she probably forgot," she remarked. I hugged her. "Scott, any other day I'd be overjoyed, but December 29th is like an anniversary for us. Khalila will soon be finished in the bathroom, and you have no idea what you've done to the girl. She shines like a fresh penny, and I'm telling you, she's flashed that enormous diamond in my face at least 8 times since she arrived. Believe me, I want her to be happy, but only today." I looked at her, puzzled. "What's today, Catherine?" She sighed deeply, her expression softening. "It's the anniversary of her father's passing. Every year, we remember him on this day. It's always been hard on Khalila, and I just hope she's ready to face this day with all these new changes in her life." I felt a pang of guilt. I had no idea. "I'm so sorry, Catherine." She shook her head. "It's okay, Scott. Just be there for her. She needs you more than ever now." "But I know a lot about you from my dad," she explained. "You were always the good son, the one who did everything right. Your parents were so proud of you. I can't believe you're now in a situation where you have to deal with such a messy divorce and all this drama." I sighed. "Life's complicated, and things don't always turn out the way we plan, but I need to protect myself and make sure this is handled properly." She nodded. "I understand. We'll make sure everything is airtight. Linda won't be able to come back and cause you any trouble once this is done." "Thank you," I said, feeling a bit of relief. "I appreciate your help." "You're welcome," she replied with a smile. "Now, go see the realtor and get this over with. You deserve to move on and be happy." Next, I headed to the realtor's office. The realtor was a friend of mine from high school, Mark Johnson. He greeted me with a firm handshake and a warm smile. "Scott, it's been too long," he said. "Let's get you sorted out. I've already got a few potential buyers lined up for your house." "Thanks, Mark," I replied. "I just want to get this done as quickly and smoothly as possible." "No worries," he assured me. "We'll take care of it. Just sign these papers, and I'll handle the rest." After signing the necessary documents, I decided to drive by the old house. As I pulled up, a flood of memories hit me. This was the place where I had built my life, where I had loved and lost. It was strange seeing it now, knowing I was about to let it go forever. I parked the car and walked around the property. It was in decent shape, but I could see the wear and tear from years of neglect. I knew it was time to move on, to let go of the past and embrace the future. I headed back to Khalila's mom's house, feeling a mix of emotions: relief, sadness, and a hint of excitement for what was to come. As I walked in, I found Khalila and her mom laughing together in the kitchen. "How did it go?" Khalila asked, her eyes sparkling with curiosity. "Everything's set," I replied, smiling. "The papers are signed, and the house will be on the market soon. It's all going to be behind us soon." "That's great news," Catherine said, giving me a warm hug. "You deserve this fresh start, Scott." "Thanks, Catherine," I said, appreciating her support. Now, how about that dinner? Khalila's face lit up. Yes, let's celebrate. There's a great new place downtown I've been dying to try. We spent the evening enjoying good food, reminiscing about old times, and planning for the future. The weight of the past was slowly lifting, and for the first time in a long while, I felt hopeful. As we drove back to the hotel that night, Khalila snuggled up next to me, her head resting on my shoulder. "I'm so proud of you, Scott," she whispered. "You're handling all of this so well." "I couldn't do it without you," I replied, kissing her forehead. "You give me strength." We arrived at the hotel, and as we got ready for bed, I couldn't help but feel a sense of peace. The journey wasn't over yet, but we were moving forward together. And that made all the difference. The next morning, we woke up early to meet the real estate agent at the house. As we walked through each room, memories flooded back. Khalila squeezed my hand, and I knew she felt it too. "This place has a lot of history," she said softly, "but it's time to make new memories." "I agree," I replied, pulling her close, "and we'll do it together." The realtor assured us that the house would sell quickly, and we felt a sense of closure as we handed over the keys. It was a bittersweet moment, but one that marked the beginning of a new chapter. As we drove away, I glanced in the rearview mirror, watching the house fade into the distance. Khalila reached over and took my hand, her touch grounding me. "We're ready," she said, her voice filled with determination. "Yes, we are," I agreed, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. Our journey wasn't over, but with Khalila by my side, I knew we could face anything that came our way. Together, we were unstoppable. But we've had family interactions for decades. It's almost as if you were a distant cousin of mine. I have heard nothing but positive things about you. Linda, not so much. Everyone in town has heard the story of how you abandoned Linda and left town, but we're astute enough to read between the lines. You're leaving the town you grew up in, leaving a successful career on the spur of the moment. Something just did not make sense. Linda began hanging out with those nasty women just a few days after you departed. And by horrible women, I do not mean lesbians in general. Believe me, nobody cares. Trust me, nowadays, no one cares who sleeps with whom. There are a few ladies and men in town that lead unconventional lifestyles. Once again, nobody cares. But those women, they are a threat. They were not only proud of their lifestyle, they used it as a club to hit people over the head with. They couldn't have been worse if they were a swarm of goose-stepping Nazis marching down Main Street. My God, the clothing they wore and how they acted. In public, it was too much. It didn't take long for folks to connect the dots and figure out why you left. There was also the fact that your daughter, Annabelle, did not appear to be in financial need when you left her. She still attended her lectures and had money to spend. However, she never returned to your residence. She came into town on a regular basis to spend out with her buddies. However, she attended classes all summer and stayed in the dorms. That told most of us that the problem was undoubtedly in the house. And again, with only Linda. Her friends were also present. It was rather evident. People in the area went to great lengths to get rid of her. They enacted a variety of rules prohibiting parties and gatherings, as well as noise above a specific threshold after business hours. They even implemented laws prohibiting non-family members from using the same space in a community zoned for single-family homes. And they contacted the cops on her, ticketing her so many times that she was declared a nuisance. However, the most effective thing they did was discovered her and her buddies attempting to convince a teenage girl to attend one of their gatherings. A judge issued a restraining order, forcing Linda to leave the house since she could not come within 100 yards of the girl's home. Linda couldn't even stay in the house anymore. That was when she tried to sell it and realized she couldn't, so she hired an out-of-town lawyer who convinced her that she needed to divorce you. He also assured her that since you had gone voluntarily, she could have the house. But I guess she wanted money so much that she divorced you for desertion, and since you'd already been gone for a year, it would go by even faster. However, the legislation is difficult, and since she couldn't truly pay the lawyer she'd hired and had stiffed him on the fee for the job he'd already done, he was irritated with her. She filed the papers online on her own, and the lawyer never informed her that by divorcing you for abandonment, Both sides walked away with their own crap. She was furious when she discovered she couldn't sell the house, and that essentially she had kicked herself out of the only stable thing she had left. When people figured out what happened, they started seeing Linda in a new light. It was as if all the secrets she had tried to keep hidden were finally coming to light. She had burned so many bridges that by the time she realized her mistakes, it was too late to rebuild any of them. People in town didn't just dislike her, they actively wanted her gone. They had seen enough of her antics and her disrespect for the community's values. And then there was you, Scott. Your leaving had left a void, but it also made everyone realize just how much Linda had taken advantage of you. They sympathized with you, understanding that you had to leave to preserve your own sanity. So when you disappeared and Linda's true colors came out, the town rallied against her. They didn't want her there, not because of her sexual orientation, but because of the way she flaunted her disregard for everyone else. The restraining order was the final straw. People had tolerated her long enough, and when she started dragging impressionable young girls into her mess, the town decided to act. She never saw it coming, Catherine continued, and to be honest, neither did most of us. We knew Linda had her issues, but we never thought it would come to this. It was as if once you left, she lost all semblance of control. The woman spiraled, and now, seeing her like this, trying to cling to the only thing she has left, it's almost pitiful. Almost, Kalila added, her tone sharp, but it's hard to pity someone who's done so much damage, someone who can't even see past their own selfish desires. Exactly, Catherine agreed. Linda has made her bed, and now she has to lie in it. It's just unfortunate that you, Scott, have to be dragged back into this mess to clean up after her one last time. One last time, I repeated, nodding. That's all this is. I'll sign the papers, sell the house, and be done with it, for good. You deserve better, Scott, Catherine said softly, and it looks like you found it with Kalila. Don't let Linda drag you down again. I won't, I promised. Kalila and I are moving forward together. This is just a final chapter in a book that's already ended. We're starting a new story now. And with that, I felt a sense of closure. The past was just that, the past. Kalila and I had our future ahead of us, and nothing was going to stand in our way. Allowance. That would have been okay in our 20s, but now I need to get out and do something. I'm the one who manages our office. Everyone tells me everything. I knew about you and Kalila long before Linda. She's a bit of a dimwit, honestly. Ellen's words brought a small chuckle out of me. The town's grapevine was stronger than I remembered. Well, it's good to be back, I said, though my voice lacked the conviction I was hoping for. But just for a short while. You better get inside and check out the house, Donald advised, his face suddenly serious. It's been through a lot. Taking his advice, I walked up to the front door. My heart ached as I turned the key in the lock. The house greeted me with an eerie silence, and a faint, unpleasant odor lingered in the air. I flicked on the lights, revealing the interior in disarray. The furniture was covered in dust, and there were stains on the carpet that hadn't been there before. The kitchen was worse, dirty dishes piled high, and the once gleaming countertops were now stained and sticky. I made my way to the living room, where a large crack ran across the ceiling. It seemed symbolic of the rift that had formed in my life. The memories of happier times felt like a distant dream. But as I moved through the house, I reminded myself why I was here, to finalize things with Linda and close this chapter of my life for good. A sudden noise startled me, and I turned to see Linda standing in the doorway, looking disheveled and exhausted. "Scott," she said, her voice a mix of surprise and something that sounded almost like relief. "I didn't think you'd actually come." "I told you I would," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "Let's get this over with." We moved to the dining room table, where the papers were laid out. Linda's eyes were filled with a mixture of hope and desperation. "Scott, we can still fix this," she pleaded. "We had so many good years together. This house has seen so much of our life." "Those years are gone, Linda," I said firmly. "This house is just a reminder of what went wrong. I need to move forward, and so do you." Her face crumpled, and for a moment I saw the woman I had once loved. "Just sign the papers," I continued. "You'll get the money, and we can both start fresh." She nodded slowly and picked up the pen. As she signed her name, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. This was it, the final severance of our past. When she was done, I took the papers, leaving a copy for her. "I hope you find what you're looking for, Linda," I said softly. "I really do." With that, I turned and left the house, feeling a strange sense of peace. I had done what I needed to do. Outside, Ellen and Donald were still waiting. "Done deal?" Ellen asked. "Yeah," I replied, nodding. "It's over." "Good for you," Donald said, clapping me on the back. "You deserve to be happy." I walked back to my car, where Kalila was waiting. She looked up from her phone and smiled when she saw me. "All done?" she asked. "All done," I confirmed, sliding into the driver's seat. As we drove away, I felt a sense of closure. Kalila took my hand and squeezed it gently. "Here's to new beginnings," she said. "Here's to new beginnings," I echoed, feeling hopeful for the first time in a long while. Allowance. I work part-time in the nursing home's kitchen. I talk to Catherine all the time, and she's so happy she's about to burst. Naturally, she expresses her pride that she will soon be a grandmother. And for the past few years, she has been telling us a new Scott and Kalila story every few weeks. It was always, Scott did this or that. Scott is forcing Kalila to get her degree, regardless of whether she wants to work. She understands that you were attempting to ensure Kalila's ability to care for herself and obtain employment in the event of your death. Or in case things don't work out with us, I added, smiling at the thought. Ellen burst out laughing and shook her head. "I don't think anything short of death will separate you two," she said. "Don't forget, I used to watch those two girls whenever you had to run errands and they didn't want to go. Kalila was continually telling people she was going to marry you. We all assumed she was joking. When she got older, we assumed it was a crush. When she was in high school, we felt bad for her. We believed she was going to be heartbroken, but she proved everyone wrong." Before she could finish speaking, my phone rang. "Hey you," Kalila exclaimed enthusiastically as I answered. "The pregnant girl is hungry." "On my way," I said, laughing. I got so busy talking to Donald and Ellen that I lost track of time. I turned back to Ellen. "Kalila says hello," I told her, then headed back to the house. The evening was unremarkable, except that Catherine insisted on our staying with her rather than going to a motel. The next day, I met with Megan, my realtor, and learned that I had very little time. She had previously arranged appointments for numerous buyers to view the residence. I truly assumed I'd have several days to repair some of the little damage Linda had caused. Cutting the lawn, mending the gate, and covering the pool were all tasks I could complete in less than a day, after which I could address some of the indoor issues. That was the plan. Kalila, of course, had to come with me. "Scott, I thought I was going to have to put her in restraints yesterday when you were gone," she said, half joking. So while I worked on the exterior, Kalila swept and dusted the interior. "I always loved this house," she said to me. "It felt more like home than my mom's apartment for me." I smiled at her. "Home is wherever you are. Don't worry, we'll get our own house shortly." "I love you, honey." "Boy, you are smooth," she said, laughing. "That really alters my plans. I might have to get rid of my mother tonight so you can have your way with me." "So, what were your plans at first?" I asked, laughing. "We are going on a drive to watch the submarine races in the woods," she said, smirking. "But as I grew up, I imagined us doing it in my bed. It's difficult to pass up the opportunity to live out a fantasy." The next morning, we ate breakfast at a neighborhood eatery. Catherine traveled with us. As we sat there, I couldn't help but feel a sense of nostalgia mixed with the excitement of a new beginning. The town, with its familiar sights and sounds, held so many memories, both good and bad. But now it was time to create new ones, and I was ready for it. Kalila squeezed my hand under the table. "This is going to be great, Scott. I can feel it." "I hope so," I replied, looking around at the faces of the people who had been part of my life for so long. "I really hope so." As we finished our breakfast and prepared for the busy day ahead, I felt a sense of calm. For the first time in a long time, I felt like everything was going to be okay. And with Kalila by my side, I knew it would be. Now than it was with you. "I'm happy, Linda. I found someone who truly loves me, and I love her. This isn't about revenge or punishment. It's about moving on." Linda's grin faded, replaced by a look of realization. She turned to the woman next to her. "Diana, maybe we should go." she said, her voice trembling slightly. But Diana wasn't ready to leave. She stepped closer, glaring at me. You think you can just walk away and leave Linda with nothing? She growled. She gave you the best years of her life. And she took mine, I retorted. It's over, Diana. You can't bully me into giving her more than what's fair. She signed the contract. If she breaches it, she owes me. Kalila stood up, her hand still gripping mine. Linda, Scott's right. It's time for you to let go. We're moving on. You should too. Linda's eyes filled with tears, and for a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. But then I remembered the years of deceit, the empty promises, and the loneliness. No, I wasn't going to let her guilt trip me. Linda, I hope you find happiness, I said, my voice steady. But it won't be with me. I've moved on, and you should too. Diana pulled Linda away, muttering something under her breath. As they walked out of the restaurant, the tension finally lifted. I took a deep breath and turned back to Kalila. I'm sorry about that, I said, squeezing her hand. Don't be, she replied, her eyes shining with love. We knew it wouldn't be easy, but we're in this together. Catherine, who had been silently observing the whole exchange, finally spoke up. Well, that was dramatic, she said with a wry smile. But I'm glad it's over. Now how about we enjoy our breakfast? We all laughed, the sound breaking the last remnants of tension. As we resumed eating, I felt a sense of closure. Linda was no longer a part of my life, and for the first time in years, I felt free. After breakfast, we drove to the house for the appointments Megan had set up. The first couple seemed genuinely interested, and as I showed them around, I felt a strange sense of detachment. This house had once been my home, but now it was just a building. Kalila was right beside me, making small talk with the buyers and pointing out the features she loved. Her enthusiasm was contagious, and by the end of the day, we had several strong offers. As we left the house, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Looks like we might sell it by tomorrow, I said, feeling lighter. Good, Kalila replied. The sooner we close this chapter, the better. We drove back to Catherine's house, the setting sun casting a warm glow over the town. It had been a long, emotional day, but I felt hopeful for the future. Kalila rested her head on my shoulder, her hand on her growing belly. We're going to be okay, she whispered. Better than okay. I nodded, feeling a swell of gratitude. Yes, we are. And with that, we left the past behind, ready to embrace whatever the future held for us. Man extending his hand towards me. I'm Tom, and this is my wife, Natalie. We're here to see the house. I shook his hand, trying to keep my focus on the conversation and not let my eyes wander back to Natalie. Nice to meet you both, I said, forcing a smile. Let me show you around. As we walked towards the front door, Kalila clung to my side, her grip firm but reassuring. I could feel her eyes darting to Natalie every few seconds, ensuring I kept my gaze in check. Tom was a friendly guy, chatty and easygoing. He mentioned that they were moving from a much warmer climate and were excited about the change of seasons in Michigan. Natalie, on the other hand, was more reserved but polite. She asked a few questions about the neighborhood and the local schools, her voice soft and melodic. When we reached the living room, Tom seemed genuinely impressed. This is great, he said, looking around appreciatively. Exactly what we were hoping for. Natalie nodded, her eyes sweeping over the room. It's lovely, she agreed, and the view from the window is wonderful. Kalila chimed in, her tone a bit more relaxed. The neighborhood is really nice. We've always felt safe and welcomed here, and if you like outdoor activities, you'll love it. As we continued the tour, I couldn't help but notice how well Tom and Natalie complemented each other. Their interactions were smooth, almost choreographed, and I found myself admiring the ease with which they communicated. When we reached the backyard, Tom's eyes lit up. Wow, this is perfect, he said, taking in the space. I can already imagine our kids playing here. Natalie smiled warmly at the thought. It's just what we wanted, she said, her eyes meeting mine for a brief moment. I quickly looked away, feeling Kalila's grip tighten slightly. Well, I'm glad you like it, I said, trying to sound upbeat. We've put a lot of love into this house, and it's nice to see someone appreciate it. Tom and Natalie exchanged a glance, and I could see the decision was almost made. We're definitely interested, Tom said, turning back to me. What's the next step? You'll need to discuss the details with our realtor, Megan, I explained. She'll help you with the offer process and any other questions you might have. Natalie nodded. We'll do that. Thank you, Scott. And you too, Kalila. Kalila smiled, a genuine one this time. You're welcome. I hope everything works out for you. As they left, I could feel the tension in my shoulders easing. Kalila looked up at me, her expression softening. They seem nice, she said. Yeah, they do, I replied. I think they'll be happy here. Kalila wrapped her arms around me, resting her head on my chest. And we'll be happy wherever we go, as long as we're together, she whispered. I hugged her back, feeling a rush of gratitude. Absolutely, I said. Home is wherever you are. Later that evening, as we sat on the couch, Kalila leaned against me, her hand resting on her belly. So do you think they'll make an offer? She asked. I think so, I said. Tom seemed really taken with the place, and Natalie liked the neighborhood. Kalila nodded, a contented smile on her face. Good, it'll be nice to have this all settled. I kissed the top of her head, feeling the warmth of her body against mine. Yeah, it will be. And then we can start looking for our own place, somewhere we can build new memories. She looked up at me, her eyes shining. I can't wait. As we sat there, I realized just how far we'd come. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, I felt genuinely hopeful. With Kalila by my side, I knew we could face anything together. So you're a Mustang fan through and through? I asked, trying to keep the conversation light and friendly. Jessica grinned. Oh, absolutely. There's just something about the design, the power, and the history that gets me every time. Kalila chimed in, clearly warming up to Jessica. Scott's always been a car guy. I think that's part of why we work so well together. He loves his cars, and I love seeing him happy. That's sweet, Jessica said, nodding appreciatively. It sounds like you two have a great thing going. Billy, who had been mostly quiet, spoke up. It's rare to find someone who supports your passions like that. You're lucky, Scott. I know I am, I replied, squeezing Kalila's hand. She's my rock. Kalila blushed a little, leaning into me. Well, you make it easy to support you when you're so passionate about what you love. As we continued chatting, the atmosphere relaxed even more. We talked about everything from car modifications to favorite road trips, and it became clear that Billy and Jessica were genuinely nice people who shared our interests. Eventually, the conversation turned back to the house. So, what do you think of the place? I asked, trying to gauge their interest. Billy looked around, taking in the view of the backyard. I think it's fantastic. It's got a lot of potential, and we can definitely see ourselves living here. Jessica nodded in agreement. Yeah, it feels like it could be home, and with a bit of work, it could be perfect. That's great to hear, I said, feeling a sense of relief. If you have any questions or need more information, just let us know. We will, Billy assured me. Thank you for showing us around. We appreciate it. After they left, Kalila and I sat down on the porch, enjoying the quiet of the evening. They seemed nice, Kalila said, resting her head on my shoulder. Yeah, they did, I agreed. I think they'll make a great fit for the house. Kalila sighed contentedly. I'm glad. It feels good knowing that someone who appreciates it as much as we do will be living here. I kissed the top of her head, feeling a deep sense of contentment. We did our best with this place, and now it's time for someone else to make their memories here. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the yard, I felt a sense of closure. We were ready to move forward, to build our future together, and to leave the past behind. And with Kalila by my side, I knew we could face anything that came our way. The next day, we met with Megan to discuss the offers on the house. It turned out that Billy and Jessica had made a solid offer, and after a brief discussion, we decided to accept it. It felt right, knowing that the house would be in good hands. A few weeks later, we were packing up our things, preparing to move to our new home. Kalila was buzzing with excitement, already planning how she wanted to decorate and make it our own. As we drove away from the house for the last time, I glanced in the rearview mirror, seeing it fade into the distance. It had been a place of many memories, both good and bad, but now it was time for a new chapter. Kalila reached over and took my hand, her eyes shining with anticipation. Here's to our new beginning, she said. To our new beginning, I echoed, feeling a sense of adventure and hope for the future. And with that, we drove towards our new life, ready to face whatever came our way, together. Actually, I haven't looked at your car yet. We laughed at this picture. Isn't this from the Woodward Dream Cruise? She laughed. Yep, I replied. It's a 2000 SVT Cobra R. She rolled her eyes, and her smile suggested that she was laughing at me. Scott, please don't tell me that you have it too, she said with a smile. What? I asked. The way your voice got when you said 2000 Cobra R, it was as if you were a Catholic and were discussing the Pope. It is an automobile. Do you know what R stands for? Race, I said. The Rs are all high-performance, limited edition track vehicles. They're pared down, and anything that adds weight without improving performance is removed. That's what the guys think, she said, laughing. It stands for rough, as in, the ride is so bumpy that my ass hurts when I get out, and this moron is so obsessed with that ridiculous car that I can't believe it. A few months back at the end of the summer, I wanted to go to the beach as we used to do when we were kids. We used to drive his Mustang right onto the beach, which provided shade during the day as we waited for it to turn dark. Why do you want it dark? Asked Kalila. I have a pale complexion, therefore I don't fare well in the sun. Are you also attempting to avoid the sun? How can you protect your skin? We were on a quest, Jessica said, laughing. Like Lord of the Rings, asked Kalila. Ours wasn't quite as epic, Jessica smirked. Jessica, Billy grumbled. Chill. I like her, Jessica moaned. I can tell we're going to be buddies. Besides, she is already pregnant. How the hell did she become that way? Jessica then turned back to Kalila. We had this plan to screw on the beach at every lake in Michigan. Wow, Kalila smiled. It would probably take a year or two, but I truly like the notion. Kalila, Billy whispered softly. There are roughly 11,000 lakes in Michigan. So after a long separation and marriage to other people, we reunited on the fantasy cruise. At the conclusion of the summer, I was ready to rejoin the fellowship and continue our adventure. So I got up one morning and said, Patrick, let's call in sick and go to the beach. He can't say no to me, even if he never calls in. We were on. He wanted to drive a Cobra. Wait, is it your car? I said, shocked. She looked at me like I was insane. It's his. I gave it to him when we got back together. So there we were on the beach. It was terrible. He declined to drive the car on the sand, and the entire time we were there, he kept looking at the sky rather than at me. I think he believes that getting the automobile wet is blasphemy. We ended up returning home. We went back that weekend and knocked that beach off our list, Billy added. We still didn't do it right, Jessica said. I thought it would be romantic if we drove our Shelby GT350Rs. I drove hers and she drove mine, Billy explained. Believe it or not, hers is an R. She grabbed his lips to stop him from talking, she said, before kissing him. Patrick, do you remember when we traded? She stated. I keep telling you, baby, that I adore you more than anything on earth, but I purchased those automobiles for you. I'm not a collector. A car with no radio, no air conditioning, seats as thin as bandages, and suspension so tight that my ass feels every bump in the road is pointless to me. You cannot even take a road trip in that vehicle. Even you, baby, have to confess it. Without a radio, you can't even get weather forecasts to see if it's going to rain on your precious paint. Billy sighed, and we all laughed. It was clear they had a dynamic much like ours, full of love and gentle teasing. So what about you two? Jessica asked, turning the focus back on Kalila and me. Any crazy road trip stories? Kalila laughed. Well, Scott once tried to take me on a spontaneous trip to the Grand Canyon in his Mustang. Let's just say the car didn't quite agree with the idea of spontaneity, and we ended up breaking down in the middle of nowhere. How did you manage that? Billy asked, clearly intrigued. Let's just say we spent a lot of time in a small-town mechanic's shop, I replied, chuckling. But we made the best of it. Kalila found a way to turn even that into an adventure. Sounds like you two have a lot of fun together, Jessica said with a smile. It's nice to see couples who can laugh and enjoy the ride, no matter what. We do, Kalila agreed, squeezing my hand, and we wouldn't have it any other way. As the conversation continued, it became clear that Billy and Jessica were not just potential buyers, but also kindred spirits. They appreciated the same things we did, and it felt like we were passing the torch to the right people. By the end of the day, we had a good feeling about the sale. Billy and Jessica were excited about the house, and we were excited to see it go to someone who would love it as much as we had. As we drove back to Catherine's place, Kalila turned to me with a contented smile. You know, I think everything is going to work out just fine. I think so too, I agreed. We've got a great future ahead of us. And it's just getting started, she said, leaning in for a kiss. Just getting started. The 350R is your automobile. I have amazing air conditioning, a bomb-ass stereo, Spotify, Sirius XM, a navigation system so I don't get lost, a screen in the dashboard large enough for me to watch movies on, and the softest leather seats they manufacture. But it's an R, I exclaimed. I'm not letting you off either, buddy, she added, turning to face me. What's with the red paint? I like the red paint, Kalila commented. I see red Mustangs all the time, but I've never seen one in our color. Let me guess, Jessica remarked. You are on the run. You and Kalila got together. Anyone with sight can see how much you adore each other. She became pregnant, so you ran away together. Her parents put PIs on your tail, so you had to conceal your vehicle. This is why you painted a Boss 302 in that hue. The factory never sold them in that color. It isn't even a Ford color. You literally cannot get a Ford automobile, any Ford vehicle in that color. It had to have been done at a custom shop, right? Before I could respond, she continued, they only produced this automobile for 2 years. Patrick is probably questioning why you would consider making any changes to it. He's something of a purist. All of his cars are exactly as they came from the factory. What do you mean by all? I asked. That's part of our problem, she remarked. Now that we're back together, we'll have to downgrade. A lot. My cheap-ass ex-husband forced me to go postal on him throughout our divorce. I was able to quadruple the amount I received from him, but things turned unpleasant. I had to threaten to divulge many of his secrets. Even then, he believed he was the brightest person in the room. You see, he assumed that our prenuptial agreement was solid. The man is worth billions, and he thought he'd take me away for $10 million. Even worse, he knew that as soon as I got rid of his ass, I'd marry Patrick. So the way alimony works is that the payments stop as soon as I remarry, so he doesn't even have to pay me the entire $10 million. Of course, I got to keep all of my cars and our pick of houses, but I wasn't going to settle for less. I ended up receiving double the $10 million in a lump settlement. He also purchased the company that Patrick works for and donated it to him, with the condition that Patrick serve as a consultant for Williams' tech initiatives. Patrick's ex-boss, the former owner, continues to operate the company so Patrick may focus on what he enjoys doing. Patrick even gave me a job, his former wife's employment, so everything is well that ends well. What happened with the ex-wife? Asked Kalila. While we were searching for Patrick around the country and around the world, Amy and I became friends. Sort of, Jessica replied. I like it. It was the first time I'd ever had a female friend. We both knew it wasn't going to end well. Neither of us were going to give up, and sharing is simply not in our character. But we dealt with our loneliness differently. I devised ideas and strategies to get rid of her after we discovered him. And she gave in to temptation. Temptation, I asked, intrigued. Jessica nodded. Yeah, she got involved with someone else. It was easier for her to move on. When Patrick and I finally reunited, she graciously stepped aside. I think she was relieved in a way, ready to start a new chapter in her life without all the drama. Sounds like a roller coaster, Kalila said, shaking her head. But I guess everything worked out in the end. It did, Jessica agreed. And now we're here, ready to start our new chapter together, just like you two. I smiled at Kalila, feeling a wave of gratitude for having her by my side through all the chaos. Yeah, just like us, I said, squeezing her hand. Here's to new beginnings. Cheers to that, Jessica echoed, raising an imaginary glass. New beginnings and endless possibilities. As we stood there, sharing stories and laughter, I couldn't help but feel a deep sense of connection. We were all navigating our own paths, but somehow those paths had led us to this moment. And in that moment, it felt like everything was exactly as it should be. Far too many times to make it appear that she genuinely wanted to be with him. The one thing you can say about her was that Amy could definitely fuck. So, you kept track of it and notified him when you two came back. They were all together, right? Asked Kalila. If it had been necessary, I probably would have, Jessica admitted. But it was unnecessary. There was a double cross happening. My ex-husband was paying the cost for our search. We have some of the world's greatest private investigators on Patrick's case. The trouble was that Williams was also funding Patrick. Unfortunately, practically every hotel room we booked was bugged and wired for video. I didn't need to tell Patrick anything because he saw it all the time. I've only had 3 men in my life, including Patrick, and one of them, one of my mother's several lousy lovers. I was 20 years old when I was drugged and raped. I believe I only slept with Williams twice during our marriage. Twice was enough to convince him that I simply wasn't his cup of tea. He's extremely wealthy. How Tony Stark puts it, genius, billionaire, or philanthropist, take away the philanthropic part and you get Williams. That man never earned a dollar he didn't like. He was completely willing to spend and pay lavishly. If he thought he could use you for something, he was not the type to give you anything else. Poor Patrick spent weeks watching us as we looked for him. Amy made her own bed. When he got bored of watching us, he realized his marriage was over. I gave her some money, and now she's out there trying to figure out her own life. But there were other things Patrick and I needed to talk about, such as what he felt I did when we were younger that led him to leave me in the first place. However, that is no longer relevant, so we need a smaller house, and we need to decide what to do with the automobiles. We've set a strict limit of 5, and determining what to include on that list is terrible. He's picking really dumb cars, she added, smiling at him. And that smile struck him like bright sunshine. It warmed me just seeing them. So he gets to choose 2 automobiles while you get to choose 3? I asked. Nope, 5 cars each, she replied. But it's really 4 apiece, since I'm going to be upset if the 2020 GT500 I bought him for Christmas isn't on his wish list, and one of my autos still irritates him. I bought one of the new C8 Corvettes, and he won't even look at it, hypocrite that he is. It doesn't count, Billy complained. It was a gift. My ex used to give out cars as bonuses, she went on to say. He gave Patrick a Ford GT. That's why I figured that I deserved that vet. You mean his automobiles are dumb? Asked Kalila. He picks cars that are so super rare that he's never going to drive them and enjoy them, she went on to say. And even then, he's frightened of getting a scratch on them. And one of his automobiles is a forgery anyway. Bullshit, Billy muttered, looking at her. That car was made for that awful movie, she replied, standing in front of him. Ford never made that car in that trim. Kalila and I watched their playful banter, feeling a sense of kinship with them. Despite the complexities and drama of their past, they seemed genuinely happy together, just like us. It was a reminder that even after all the turmoil, love could find a way to flourish. All right, I said, trying to diffuse the tension. Let's agree that both of you have excellent taste in cars, even if you don't always agree on the specifics. Now, how about we get back to what we came here for? Selling this house. Jessica nodded, still smiling at Billy. You're right, Scott. Let's get this show on the road. Billy chuckled and gave her a gentle nudge. And maybe, just maybe, we'll find some common ground on our car choices along the way. As we all headed inside to finalize the details, I couldn't help but feel optimistic. Life had thrown us all some serious curveballs, but we were still standing, still moving forward. And in that moment, surrounded by friends and loved ones, I knew that everything was going to be all right. So why did you buy it? He asked. You had that car before we got back together. Because I knew that when I found you again, you'd go ape shit over it, she said with a chuckle. Little did I know that you'd go even crazier over an even dumber car. I like cars, he remarked, especially the Mustangs. But there's one thing I'm crazier about, and that's you, he stated. Kalila had realized that their alleged argument was nothing more than a ruse to bring them together. They had zoned out and were no longer aware that we were around. How much are you? Inquired Jessica, hugging Billy. Kalila cut her off. You guys should check out the house, Kalila added. That is what you came for. Scott, you can show Billy the garage and yard while Jessica and I look inside. His ex-wife did certain things to the house, and we've only just begun the repairs. Sounds good to me, Billy replied. He and I went outside to the yard. I showed him the fence, including the gate I had just rebuilt. I had cut off the electricity to the gate by turning off one of the circuit breakers in the laundry room box. I went inside to reset the breaker and heard something unexpected. Me? Do you actually want to be my friend? Kalila asked. I don't say things I don't mean, Jessica stated. I picked up on that, Kalila remarked. My granny would have described you as being kind of sassy, brassy, kiss my assy. I like that, Jessica said, laughing. However, most people miss it. I'm simply arguing with Patrick. I don't bother debating with anyone else because I honestly don't care. Anyway, my disagreements with him are because, well, I enjoy a quarrel with him. But really, we lost so much time together due to stupid crap and misunderstandings. I have to enjoy every moment of the rest of our life together. You should have seen his mother's expression when we visited her and his father. Anyway, what do you want me to do, friend? You're beautiful, cultured, and wealthy, Kalila stated. You can live wherever you wish. Please do not buy my house. Kalila, if you don't want to sell it, Jessica expressed her confusion. Scott and I live down south, Kalila explained. We came back here for a few days to sell the house and remove his wicked ex-wife out of our lives. But now that we are back here, I want to stay. This is our hometown. I understand they say you can't go home again, but... Who said you couldn't go home? Asked Jessica. Don't you think you should inform Scott? I believe he'd do anything to make you happy. I'm happy just being with him, Kalila stated. We really haven't had the opportunity to discuss this and get a sense of how he feels about it. He was abused by his wife. There might be too many terrible memories here. If that is the case, Jessica began, we'll buy another house, she announced. Maybe we'll just stay in our little museum in Michigan. At the very least, it features a garage for 5 cars. We could build another one, just like it right next to it. There is enough land on the property for that. I owe you one, Kalila stated. What are friends for? Jessica laughed. After hearing that exchange, I snuck back outside, a lot on my mind. My phone rang the next morning as I lay in bed with Kalila curled up next to me. Dad, I need to talk to you, she said. Annabelle? I inquired, still half asleep. Who else calls you Dad? She asked. Kalila said you'd help us move, but that is not what I phoned you about. I need to tell you something. Okay, talk, I replied, shaking off the grogginess. Dad, I love Mom. I'm just not sure I like her, she blurted out. I visited her and the beast she lives with yesterday. We had a conversation, and she mentioned something that offended me. You can't really take anything your mom says seriously, I said, trying to calm her down. Dad, we were talking about you selling the house to get her out of the financial situation she put herself in. I was telling her how fortunate she was that you were helping her out. She laughed, Dad. She assured me that no matter what occurred, she knew you'd help her out. She called you a sucker. It kind of pissed me off. Kalila murmured in her sleep, and I opened my eyes wider. Annabelle's last words had triggered my brain to function fully. Okay, wait a minute, I said. First of all, who is us? You mentioned that Kalila informed you that we'd help us move, because if us is your mother and that water buffalo that... Oh, whoops, I forgot about that, she remarked. Dad, I got a boyfriend. His name is Robert. You're gonna like him. There's no way I'm going to live with Mom. Dad, it's time. I'm quite confident the next time he asks, I'll probably marry him. So, wait, has he asked you before? I asked, feeling a bit overwhelmed. Why not? She replied. Because you hadn't met him yet. But that isn't the problem. The problem is Mom. She has developed some, habits since you have been gone. She owes money all around town. Honey, you were there when your mom and I spoke, I blurted out. I know about the taxes and her bills. No, Daddy, you don't, she stated. She has borrowed money from everybody, her parents, your parents, friends, and the bank. She even borrowed some from me. How could you? I asked, stunned. I have a very generous father who pays for my classes and expenses, she went on to say. Mom convinced me that I was working too much. She told me that I should enjoy my college experience. So maybe I should email you my schedule as usual, but drop out of a handful of classes before the drop date and get a refund. I was shocked. I gave her the money, she explained. It was gone in a day. How? I asked, feeling a mixture of anger and disbelief. Dad, she's not the lady you remember, and she was never the woman you thought, except for you and I. Everyone in town knew she was a lesbian. She'd always been. But now, Daddy, she's crazy. She drinks like a fish and consumes more cannabis than a string trimmer. She is out of control. Several of the people she owes money to are suing her in small claims court. The rest have simply cut her off. Annabelle, honey, it's kind of too late, I blurted out. Kalila and I have a lot of things to do. and I kind of gave your mother my word. Besides, I may have already sold the house." There was a long pause. Annabelle's voice softened, and I could sense the worry in her tone. "Dad, I just don't want you to get hurt again. Mom's not going to change, no matter how much you help her. Just promise me you'll be careful, okay?" I sighed, feeling the weight of her words. "I promise, Annabelle. I promise." Kalila sat up and dried her eyes. "It's a beautiful house, Annabelle," I told her. "We made a lot of great memories there. That house should be occupied by a wonderful family so that it can once again be filled with love and laughter." "Oh, Daddy," she groaned. "Call your mom," I advised. "Do not tell her about our chat, but tell her I've sold the house. Tell her that unless she sells her broken-down automobile or borrows money to pay off the taxes, the transaction will fail. She should be able to collect at least a few $1,000s for the automobile, and she can make up the difference by selling the furnishings she stole from the house." "Her antiques?" Annabelle laughed. "She's going to be pissed." "Sometimes you gotta spend money to make money," I said. Kalila wrapped her arms around me. "I've got to call Billy and Jessica to tell them that I sold the house to another couple," I blurted out. She shrugged her shoulders and threw her arms around me. "So our drive home wasn't as spectacular as you expected, huh?" I asked. "Scott, anywhere that we're together is home to me," she replied. She put the blankets back over us, wrapped her arms about me, and went back to sleep. "Are you doing that thing again, staring at me as I sleep?" she murmured. "Kind of," I said. "Why?" she murmured tiredly. "Actually, I was reflecting on how fortunate I was to have you, how much more mature you are than Linda ever was, and how much I adore you." 3 hours later, I called Linda and agreed to meet her. Strangely, she wanted to meet at a lawyer's office. I questioned why Linda needed a lawyer. Kalila and I arrived early. Kalila did not appear to be her normal, joyful self. It pained me to see her sad, but I was confident she would be all right once the meeting was over. The biggest surprise came when we realized that the lawyer was Donna, Kalila's cousin. She did not work for Linda at all. In fact, Linda's debtors had hired her. Her role was to witness the transaction and ensure that her clients were paid. A pair of county sheriff's deputies were waiting outside the door to ensure she didn't take the check and get away with it. Linda had received money on occasion, but did not use it to pay down her debt. Linda's creditors were fed up with her pranks and threatened to sue her if she didn't pay. "While you and my cousin were away on your honeymoon, Linda went insane," Donna explained. "She began with a sob story about how you had run off and abandoned her. Within a few weeks, it was clear why you had left her. For whatever reason, she never sought to find work. She simply stole what she could and wasted it all just as rapidly. When no one in town would offer her credit, she attempted to borrow against the house or sell it outright. When she realized she couldn't sell the house without you, she devised that ridiculous plan to divorce you. And now," I said, shaking my head, "she's trying to clean up the mess she made." "Exactly," Donna replied. "But the game is up. The creditors want their money, and they hired me to make sure they get it." Kalila squeezed my hand, and I looked at her, feeling a surge of relief. This was almost over. "Let's get this done," I said. Linda finally arrived, looking disheveled and desperate. She glanced at the deputies nervously before sitting down. The transaction was quick, and as Linda signed the necessary papers, I felt a weight lifting off my shoulders. After everything was finalized, Donna handed Linda the check, and one of the deputies immediately stepped forward to escort Linda out. "Scott," Linda said, her voice trembling, "I'm sorry for everything." I nodded but said nothing. There was nothing left to say. Once Linda was gone, I turned to Donna. "Thank you for your help." "Just doing my job," she replied with a smile. "Take care of Kalila, and good luck with everything." Kalila and I left the office hand in hand, stepping out into the crisp afternoon air. The sun was shining, and for the first time in a long while, the future seemed bright. "Let's go home," Kalila said, her voice full of hope. "Yes," I agreed. "Let's go home and take the house." When that failed, and she realized she was in over her head, she recruited a team of private investigators. I believe we were all taken aback when we learned that she had not only found you, but that you were returning to sell the house for her. The strange thing is, no one is surprised about you and my cousin. Kalila smiled, and in a subtle motion, she displayed her engagement ring. I've already seen it, said the lawyer, smiling. Linda and Diana arrived, and she was cut off. I've got your check, Linda said, smirking. I hope you have mine. What check? Asked Donna. Where the hell did you get the money? That should be going somewhere. Relax, bitch, Linda said. I needed to pay off the taxes on the house before it could be sold. Without selling the house, I can't get your fucking blood money. You mean your liquor pot and party money? Donna replied. You acted like a fucking teenager. And Scott dumped me for one, Linda exclaimed. Yet nobody seems to think that's a negative thing. I needed to let go to get over my anguish at... What fucking pain, I replied quietly. Linda, you've lied to me and cheated on me throughout our relationship and before. Your choices produced the anguish you experienced. My actions, hissed Linda. Scott, we were in love. I kept your house and even went above my natural instincts to bear your pampered kid. Wasn't I entitled to one or two indiscretions? Did someone mention his spoiled daughter? Annabelle walked into the room with Megan and her briefcase. I pointed out the check Linda was clutching in her claw, and Megan quickly snatched it before Linda realized it was missing. Thank you very much, Megan responded. I'll make sure that the county treasurer receives this right away. Now, Scott, I have some paperwork for you to sign and a check to give you. Me? Linda's excitement was palpable. With the probable exception of Annabelle, who didn't care either way, Kalila was the only person in the room who wasn't happy. She put her pain aside and snuggled against my arm, as if telling herself that it was merely a house and that we were much more important. Scott, I need your signature and yours, Kalila, Megan replied with a laugh. I signed the forms where indicated, and Kalila grudgingly did as well. Why the hell did she need to sign anything for my house? Asked Linda. Ah, screw it, who cares? Just give me my check. Give me that mucking funny. Megan shook her head and handed Linda the check. Linda smirked as she gazed at the check. As soon as I cash this, I'll give you your cut so you can get out of my ass, she said to Donna. I think that as an officer of the court, I'll take the check, see that my clients are paid, and give you the balance, she stated. If you don't mind me asking, where'd you come up with the money for this? Linda's smirk widened. I sold some antiques and a few other things I had lying around, she said. Donna raised an eyebrow. Antiques, huh? Well, as long as the taxes are paid and my clients are satisfied, that's all that matters. Linda handed over the check with a reluctant sigh, and Donna took it, immediately handing it to one of the deputies to ensure it was taken care of. All right, Scott, Kalila, you're all set here, Donna said. You can go back to enjoying your lives. Kalila and I walked out of the office, the weight of the past finally lifting from our shoulders. It's over, I said, wrapping my arm around her. We can finally move on. Kalila smiled up at me, her eyes shining with love and relief. Yes, we can. Let's go home, Scott, our home. As we walked away, I couldn't help but feel a sense of peace wash over me. The future was bright, and for the first time in a long while, I felt truly free. With Kalila by my side, I knew we could face anything together. The taxes. I pawned my antique furniture, Linda explained. My parents passed it along to me before they went away, and I borrowed money from Diana. She delved into her retirement account. As soon as you pay me, I will get it back. Linda, your parents are still alive, I said. You stole that furniture from their storage facility. They're dead to me, she snarled. If they were unwilling to help their only child out in a crisis, what good are they? Isn't this check missing a few zeros? Donna said abruptly. I thought your house was appraised for $100,000. It was, Megan stated, but it does not imply it had to sell for that price. Scott liked the couple so much that he sold the house for substantially less. I thought Jessica was my friend, Kalila remarked regretfully. She is, I answered. She and Billy didn't buy the house. Shut that bullshit up, Linda growled. Let me see the check. How much did you sell Scott's house for? Well, I really liked the couple I sold it to, I explained. I was particularly fond of the wife. Who the hell were you fond of? Kalila asked, gazing at me fiercely. Oh my God, you get even prettier when you're jealous, I said with a giggle. Scott, how much did you sell my house for? Linda exclaimed. I only got $20 for it, I explained. But our contract clearly stated that I might have to sell it for far less than market value due to the depressed real estate scenario caused by the pandemic a few years back. Nobody has any money, Linda. Okay, $20,000, Linda remarked. I paid $5,000 for unpaid taxes. I owe the Harpy and her patrons over $10,000. So once I get my furniture back and pay Diana and the Harpy, I'll still have $5,000 to go away with. It's not as much as I wanted, but… Linda, who said anything about $20,000? I asked. I sold the house for $20. Scott, I could have bought the house myself, Kalila lamented. You did, babe, I said, laughing. I sold the house to us. That's why you had to sign the paperwork. I overheard you talking to Jessica. Until that point, I had no idea you wanted the house. Baby, I love that house, Kalila said. I may not have lived in it, but I did grow up there. All of my good recollections are in that house, and it'll be the same for our kids. But what about your bad memories? Kalila inquired. The memories of Linda rutting in the house? I laughed. Any connection I had to Linda was wiped out the first time you kissed me. Fuck that, Scott, Linda said. What am I supposed to do now? How about my money? What about my furniture? How about my future? I cannot stay in this town. They despised me. You have ruined my life, Scott. Linda, I didn't know you had any money, I said with a smile. You can put your ugly furniture up your ass. And as for damaging your life, you wrecked mine first. What goes around comes around. Have an awful life, Linda. Linda's face contorted with rage, but she couldn't argue. She had played her cards poorly, and now she was out of luck. I turned to Kalila, who was beaming with a mix of relief and joy. Let's go home, I said softly. As we walked out, Kalila's arm wrapped around mine. I felt a profound sense of closure. The past was finally behind us, and the future looked incredibly bright. With Kalila by my side, I knew we were unstoppable. We were heading back to a place that truly felt like home, ready to fill it with new memories and a lot of love. Linda stormed towards the door, but was quickly halted by the cops. Diana, who was furious, loomed over Linda. I'm gonna get my money back. Right, Linda, she mumbled, and that's how we left them. Kalila approached one of the deputies and extended her hands. You'd better arrest me, she exclaimed. For what? He inquired, puzzled. Because I'm about to assault this guy, she went on to say. By the time I'm done with him, he'll be walking funny for weeks. I don't think he'll press charges, the deputy said, laughing. Kalila and I settled down and lived happily ever after. Annabelle and Robert ultimately married and are blissfully happy together. Billy and Jessica remained in their massive lakefront home and expanded the garage significantly. Downsizing did not work for them. Instead, they ended up purchasing even more cars. They also adopted a few kids, and they periodically dropped them off for us to babysit. Those weekends became some of my favorite moments. Whenever they left the kids with us, they also left a car for me to look after. You can't beat that. Linda struck a deal with the county to discharge her debts. She now works on a road crew, picking up rubbish on freeways for minimum wage. Since she is homeless, the county placed her in a women's shelter, deducting her lodging and board from her pay. Linda will be debt-free in just over 3 years if she continues at her current pace. Last week, I saw her. I was driving down the freeway and came to a stop near where she was working. She was wearing an orange vest and scooping up rubbish with one of those spiked poles. I rolled down the window and deliberately dropped a candy wrapper on the ground. She stormed over to my car, and I stared at her through the open window. Why did you do that, Scott? She snarled. Isn't my life fucked up enough? I did it to help you, Linda, I said, smirking. How the fuck does dropping your shit on the road help me? She spat out. Job security. I laughed and sped away. A few years ago, I would never have considered returning to this town. I had spent a significant portion of my life here, and it held many painful memories. The old saying, you can't go home again, had always seemed true to me. But coming back with the love of my life, ready to start our family and enjoy the rest of my days, while also exacting some well-deserved retribution on the person who drove me away, changed everything. Who says you can't go home?